The severed son, Magpie poisons and mutilates her husband in the woods, driven by years of abuse and a desperate need for liberation. As the daughter of a pastor in a highly controlled village, she lives under layers of patriarchal dominance, first from her father and then her husband. Her act is not impulsive. It is calculated and deliberate, rooted in survival and the silent rage of someone who has endured too much for too long. Immediately after the murder, Magpie sees a dark, beast-like figure watching her. This apparition connects to the monologue at the beginning, where she speaks of a creature forgotten by the light. It could represent her guilt, the darkness within her now awakened, or even a protective force she's summoned by breaking free. The beast is her shadow, something the village pretends doesn't exist. Magpie's father, the pastor, uses religion to isolate and control the villagers. He treats Magpie like property, grooming John to replace her dead husband. But Magpie's violent act disrupts this plan, threatening the system her father upholds. In killing her husband, she not only frees herself, but also disrupts the illusion of divine order he has built. When Magpie accuses Fred of raping his daughter Ursula, it is not just a verbal attack, it is a moral confrontation. She sees through the village's blind faith and forced silence. Fred, clearly threatened by the truth, tries to intimidate her with violence. His visit to Magpie, armed with a chisel and loaded with rage, confirms the kind of man he is: abusive, entitled, and unrepentant. That night, Fred repeats his vile behavior by entering Ursula's room. But this time, the forest beast intervenes. Unlike its earlier ambiguous presence, the beast now acts with purpose, punishing Fred with brutal justice. His body is torn apart, bones crushed, flesh ripped, until nothing remains. It's not a random attack, but a symbolic act. The beast becomes the force that the village and the church have failed to be. Fred's death contrasts with the pastor's false sermons and the villagers' passive complicity. The law of the land fails, but the law of the shadows prevails. Magpie does not kill Fred herself, but her confrontation triggers the beast's return. In this way, justice comes not through prayer or forgiveness, but through reckoning, fear, in the dark. Andrea, wife of Fred, has always resented Magpie's defiance. When Magpie stops attending church and openly speaks about her abuse, Andrea frames it as rebellion rather than grief. Her hatred grows when Magpie exposes the truth about Fred's predatory behavior. Instead of confronting her own husband's sins, Andrea turns her wrath toward Magpie. Andrea secretly stalks Magpie in the forest and sees something shocking: the pastor, Magpie's father, choking her in a desperate attempt to silence her. Instead of helping, Andrea uses this moment as leverage. She returns the next day with a mob, accuses Magpie of witchcraft, and orders her hanged. Her accusations stem from a twisted blend of Puritan fear, personal bitterness, and the desire to protect her own reputation by shifting the blame. Despite being saved from execution by the pastor and John, Magpie faces ultimate betrayal when her father sides with Andrea and the villagers. He imprisons her in a dark room, his own daughter, choosing control and public image over truth. Andrea's actions are rooted in cowardice and cruelty, and they succeed in turning the village fully against Magpie. The black mud acts as a transformative substance that marks John's initiation into a darker, primal realm, both spiritually and psychologically. John is sent by the pastor to retrieve David's stepson of Magpie and Magpie, but instead, he finds himself questioning his purpose. David confronts him with the futility of blind faith. For the first time, John reveals a crack in his moral armor. He doesn't want to marry Magpie. He hints that his love lies elsewhere, perhaps with David, suggesting inner conflict repressed by religious expectations. The hug between them is intimate, but what follows is even more symbolic. David smears black mud on John's neck, as though marking him. That night, John enters a dreamlike, haunted version of the woods. He is surrounded by strange, ecstatic figures, people who have surrendered to something ancient and dark. David is among them, now fully aligned with his shadowy force. The voices call to John, promising release from moral constraints. It's a seductive invitation to abandon imposed purity and embrace raw instinct. When John wakes up, he feels the change. Something inside him is broken or reborn. The black mud, possibly linked to the forest beast or the land's buried secrets, has opened a door. Whether it's corruption or liberation is unclear. But one thing is certain, John is no longer the pastor's loyal protege. The mud has marked the death of his obedience and the birth of something far more chaotic. When Magpie refuses to reveal anything about the beast, the pastor realizes she is beyond his reach. He publicly humiliates her by tying her to a cart at the quarry, framing her as a heretic. The villagers, already blinded by fear and superstition, follow his lead. He disowns her and declares that she and David are servants of darkness, using their affair as proof of moral decay. But behind this performance lies a deeper plan. He tells John to stick to the story. The pastor murders Andrea to protect his narrative and maintain control over the village. Her death becomes a necessary lie in his larger scheme. The pastor injures himself and John just enough to fake a struggle and will tell villagers that Andrea was killed by the beast, that he wounded it, and that David lost control. This carefully crafted lie turns David into a villain. When the villagers arrive, already stirred into panic, they kill David, believing they vanquished the darkness. After being imprisoned and healed by the pastor, Magpie realizes she is not being cared for. She is being contained. When John bursts in, blaming her for his descent into chaos, Magpie refuses to apologize. She reminds him that they were trying to free him from blind faith. Her act of wounding John and escaping symbolizes a clear break from submission. She no longer seeks approval or forgiveness. When she finds David dead, labeled a heretic, Magpie sees the cost of resistance. David, like her, challenged the village's rules and paid with his life. His death becomes the final straw. John's pursuit shows how even the saved can turn against them. Faced with yet another violent man, she slashes her own throat. Not as a cry for help, but as an unapologetic rejection of control. If the world sees her as a monster, she will own it on her terms. The pastor arrives to kill her, blaming her for her mother's death and his failed legacy. But before he can act, the beast, her forbidden ally, kills him instead. This is justice delivered by the darkness they all feared but never understood. The pastor, the symbol of societal control masked as righteousness, dies at the hands of the very thing he tried to suppress.